Einstein once remarked that imagination is more important than knowledge. So with that in mind, let's imagine that we are gathered in Einstein's living room in his home in Princeton, New Jersey. He is accustomed to entertaining visitors who are interested in knowing more about his life and his discoveries in physics. The year is 1948, and Professor Einstein has made Princeton his home since 1933, when he came here as a refugee from Germany. One of the reasons he chose Princeton was to continue his research at the Institute of Advanced Study. For the past 15 years later, he has rarely left his new home, preferring to divide his time between the Institute and his domestic life. And here he is now, Professor Albert Einstein.
Well, here I am. I am behind you. Yeah, I was thinking I was doing the first part of this program.
First.
Yeah, not part two, part one. Yeah. Well, well, good morning.
Good morning.
Can everybody hear me?
No.
You cannot hear me? No? Well, I
can now.
Perhaps you have heard that sound? Yeah, I'm sorry that you are frightened, but now it is all right? Yeah. Well, I had no idea that my living room could accommodate so many people. I'm afraid that the housekeeper is not here. Otherwise, she would prepare tea and lemon pound cake for all of you. Well, most of you. But unfortunately, she had to visit a friend, so I will have to provide all the entertainment myself. Let me put my bag down here someplace. Yeah, there. Often we get visitors who will come to Princeton and they wish to, well, that is a problem. They wish to come to the house. Sometimes they will come uninvited to meet with me, and they wish to learn about my life and my work. And if at any time you have a question, don't feel too shy to ask it. Yeah, so on my way here, I was at the Institute of Advanced Studies this morning when I get a call that I would be having some visitors today. And on the way, I had to stop at a neighbor's house. They have a little girl named Adelaide, and she has been having trouble with her homework, and I have agreed to help her with the mathematics. I recall it was not too long ago, she came to the house with a plate of cookies to ask me if I would be so kind to help her with the homework. So of course I agreed, and yeah, she has been doing very well, and today she wanted to give me a little something to express her gratitude, and I have it here. I will show you. Yeah, it is a yo-yo. And I have been mastering the physics of the yo-yo. Well, I have not completely mastered the physics of the yo-yo, but I am trying very hard because my grandson will be coming soon with my son Albert. He is a professor at the University of California. And I wish to teach my grandson how to use the yo-yo. I will show you what I have learned so far. Yeah, pretty good? Yeah. But that's not all I can do. I don't wish to hurt anybody, so I will go in this direction. Yeah. And this morning, Adelaide taught me something she calls over the rainbow. Do you know how to do this? That I don't know if I can do this. I will try. Yeah, well, here I try now. Okay. Well, you see, I am almost there, 50%. Not bad. If you wish to applaud, that is okay. Yeah. Well, often people, when they first meet me, they are surprised to find out that at one time I was a little baby. Yeah, it is true. I was born in the city of Ulm in Germany, in the province or the region called Bavaria. And I understand that when my grandmother saw me, she clasped her head. She said, "Oh my God, he is so fat." And they was worried because I had a very large, and my head seemed to be deformed in its shape. And so they were worried that when I grow up, I would not be normal. And well, they had evidence of this because I did not learn to speak until I was older than most children. But I will tell you something. It is not the entire story, you see. I could hear the words, I knew what I wanted to say, but I did not wish to make a mistake. So I would whisper what I wished to say to myself, very softly, very slowly. And when I was sure that it was correct, I would speak out loud. And that gave the impression to people that little Albert, well, he is a little slow here. Yeah. Well, I fooled them. Yeah. So I was born in Ulm, and 1 year later, when I am still a little baby, my mother and father, we're going to move from Ulm to Munich. Yeah, because my father, his brother, Jakob, was an engineer, and he convinced my father that it was imperative that we all move and we start a company to make electrical generators. Because at that time, electricity was revolutionary, and everybody wanted to have lights in their homes and on the streets. Now, my father was a featherbed, he was a salesman. He worked in a factory that makes the feather beds. And well, he was pretty good in the business, but not all that good. So he decided to go into business with my uncle, and we all moved to Munich. And I didn't almost remember this when my mother said to me, "Albert, come here. We're going to have a little new toy for you to play with very soon." And I was very excited because I had my collection of toys, and I was always looking forward to a new toy. And one day, my parents were not home, and I was with the housekeeper, and then they come to the front of the house. And my mother come in the house first, and she said, "Albert, come, I want to show you the new toy." So I raced across the floor, and there was my mother. She was holding something in her arms. It was wrapped in a blanket. So I was so excited. I looked under the blanket. "Well, Mama, where are the wheels? What kind of toy is this?" She said, "No, Albert, this is your baby sister. Yeah, we're going to call her Maya." Yeah, so then she was my little sister, and I played with her like a little toy. But sometimes I had a very bad temper. And if I didn't get my way, I would hold my breath until my face turned paper white. And one time, I think we was playing outside in the yard, and Maya upset me. So I picked up the toy rake and I threw it at her, and I hit her. And of course, she ran in the house. She cried. She got me into a lot of trouble, but that did not stop me. The next day, we was in the house, and once again, I lost my temper. I picked up my father's wooden bowling ball. Yeah, and I threw it at her. When I was a little older, my mother, she wanted me to be learning music, how to play the piano and later the violin. So she employed a tutor to come to the house. She herself was a musician. Yeah, and well, one day I was dissatisfied with some things that the tutor said, so I picked up the chair. And I threw it at her. I hit her, she ran out of the house. Will she never come back? That's true. Yeah, so I think it was when I was ready for the second grade, what we say here, that I was sent to the school, the public school, and right from the day one, I was not happy to be a student in the German school system. I did not like the way the teachers would relate to the students. They would treat us like little soldiers. You know, you have to sit and stand, go to the bathroom, eat this, learn, and then repeat everything back exactly as the teacher has said. What kind of learning is this? So I was a bit of a rebellious student and displeased many of the teachers as I went through the grades. And meanwhile, my father's business, well, I should tell you that when I am 5 years old, I was home from school. Well, I was not going to school yet, but I was sick. And my father, Hermann, he came with, often he would bring a little present for me. And I recall I was in the office this morning before I went to work. I was looking through some old things, and I found this present that he brought me. Can you imagine what this is? A clock, yeah, that is a good guess, but you're wrong. It is a compass. Yeah, so I am sitting in my bed and I am turning the compass, and well, no matter how I turn it, the arrow will always point in the same direction. Well, for me at 5 years old, this was an incredible mystery. What was this invisible force that would cause the compass to always point in the same direction? Now, I could be wrong, but I think that was the beginning of my scientific career. At the age of 5, I wished to understand what are the secret forces in the world. It is as if there is a big curtain, and little Albert wishes to peek behind the curtain and see what are the influences that we ordinarily are not aware of. Yeah. We had a student, and his name was Max Talmud, and he would come to the house once a week. He was a medical student, and we would prepare a nice meal for him and give him a little company. So we become friends, even though he was older than me. We could discuss science and literature, and he always would bring a little present for me. For instance, he brought me a book of geometry, and I was fascinated. I loved to explore the different theorems, and I solved the Pythagorean theorem all by myself. Well, it took 2 weeks, but I did it. Yeah, and when I was 10 years old, he brought me a 20-volume set on the history of science. And it took me 2 years, but I read every single one of those books. And in the books, I discovered my first heroes. These were the people of science who went forth on seas of knowledge, and they made discoveries that would change the way we understand reality. And they would risk everything in the pursuit of truth. And I wanted to be like them, to be a knight of reason. And one of my earliest heroes was Copernicus. Can you imagine why? You know, until the time of Copernicus, the Polish astronomer, people believed the Earth was flat, yeah? And it did not move. It was the center of the universe. Everything went around the Earth. So can you imagine if somebody said, no, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. Yeah, no, it is, the Earth is moving on its own axis, and it is orbiting around the sun, which is the center of the universe. They would say you are a criminal or you are crazy. This is not possible. The Earth does not move. Everybody knows this. Common sense tells you, look, do you see the Earth moving? When I jump up, I will come down in the same place. That proves the Earth does not move. If the Earth was moving when I jump up, I will come down in a different place. This was common sense. But Copernicus said, no, the common sense is wrong. And he based his theory not on faith or dogma, but on observation, on scientific observation. And after Copernicus, along came Kepler to verify Copernicus's observations. And in Italy, another great knight of reason. Can you think who I am imagining? Galileo, yeah. One of the greatest of all investigators. Excuse me. It was Galileo. Well, he observed through his own handmade telescope the moons of Jupiter moving around Jupiter itself. So how could the Earth be the center if there is the moons of Jupiter with their own orbits around the planet? Well, he got into a lot of trouble with the Pope. The Pope said, Galileo, I want to see you. But he was brave. He would risk everything for the truth, and they put him under house arrest because he would not give in to the Pope's dictum that he should renounce the Copernican view of the universe. And there was another fellow, a contemporary, I think, Giordano Bruno. I think he was a priest, a friar, and he shared Galileo's observations, and he would not recant. And what did they do to Giordano Bruno? They burned him alive at the stake. That was the price he paid for the truth. So you can see, I wanted to be like these people. I wanted to emulate them in my own life. And of course, one of the greatest, perhaps the greatest of all scientists was a fellow from Britain, Isaac Newton, who was born, now you can correct me if I am wrong, I think he was born 1 year after Galileo passed away. Perhaps it was Galileo in another form, I don't know. But it was Galileo, during the plague, the bubonic plague, he escaped London, he went to his mother's farm, and he was only a young man, 22, 23 years old, and you know the story, the apple fell from the tree. Well, I don't think it was really that it fell on his head. Perhaps he was sitting there by the apple tree and he was reading and the apple fell, and suddenly something lit up in his mind and he thought, what is the cause of the apple falling from the tree and the moon circling the earth and the earth circling the sun? And what he evolved from that simple observation was the theory of gravity. Well, his theory of gravity, not mine. That is another story. Yeah. What was I telling you? Yeah. So we are back in Munich, and my father's business is not doing very well for one very important reason. They are manufacturing generators that use direct current, DC, when everybody wanted to go to alternating current. And they lost important contracts. So my uncle said, listen, I have contacts in Italy, why don't we move to Milan? We start a new business. Well, I was excited, I wanted to go to Italy. But my mother said, no, Albert, you're staying here with your relatives. You must complete your high school education, and then you can come and you can visit us, you can be with us. But first, education. Well, I was very disappointed. I wanted to go with the family, and I missed my sister Maya, and I didn't wish to continue at the high school. I despised the way they was teaching us. And I was feeling very sad, very upset. So I went to the family doctor and I expressed my feelings, and he wrote a letter. And I took it to the headmaster. And the headmaster read it, saying that Einstein is suffering from depression and anxiety. And if he continues in the school, it will be deleterious to his health. So we suggest that you allow him to leave. I think I saw a smile on the headmaster's face. Yeah, all the teachers, if they could, they would have stood outside the school waving flags and cheering when they see me leave. I was a terrible student. I would skip classes and I would challenge the teachers and I would pose myself as an authority on things about which I knew nothing. So at the age of 15 or so, I packed my things. I said goodbye to my relatives, took the train, I went to Milan. Yeah, well, my parents were very surprised to see me. It was in the middle of the semester. There was the first semester and the second semester. It was during the winter time out. And my father was concerned, what are you going to do with your time now? Well, I was quite content to take hikes around the countryside, to learn about the Italian culture, and to discover spaghetti. Yeah, it became one of my favorite foods. Well, at one point, my father sat down with me and he said, Albert, you are a high school dropout. What do you want to do with your life? And I told him I wish to be a knight of reason. Well, this did not sit well with my family. They wanted me to do something more practical, like become an engineer. So what I eventually proposed was that I go to Zurich and try to get into the Polytechnic Institute in Zurich to take the entrance exam. You was allowed to do this even if you didn't have a high school certificate behind you. So reluctantly, my parents let me go to Zurich, and I took the entrance exam at the age of 15 and a half. And how do you think I did?
Very well.
Well, as they say in Italy, I did exceptionally well in the mathematical and the scientific portion of the test, but miserably on the linguistics, on the history, the subjects that I ignored in high school. Yeah. And the headmaster, the director, said to me, Einstein, I can see that you are a promising student. Why don't you complete your high school education and come back in 1 year and take the exams again? Well, of course, I was disappointed. I went and I told my family, and my father arranged for me to go to a place in Switzerland, a little village called Aro, and get enrolled in a school there. It was kind of a very unusual school because the teachers encouraged the students to use their curiosity and their imagination, to follow their own inclinations. Well, I could not have been happier. But best of all, I got to live with one of the professors and his family, Professor Jost Venteler. And he had a large family, and one of his children was a young girl my age, Marie Venteler. And I think this was my first love affair. And I was living under the same roof with her. Yeah, and this was when I discovered that I am really a poet. I would compose little love lyrics for her, and I would sneak them into places like under her pillow or in the cookie jar. So she knew that I had feelings for her. My parents were very pleased because they liked Marie Venteler, they liked the family, and they expected that one day we would become husband and wife. Well, I did very well in the new school because it fit with my own personality. And one of the things I will most remember was the teachers encouraged the students to use their imaginations and to have what we call a Gedanke experiment, a thought experiment. And my first thought experiment, what I can imagine, was what it would be like to ride on a beam of light, or to ride alongside a beam of light. What would I experience? What would happen to time? Would it slow down? Would my body shrink? Would I disappear? This is what I am trying to imagine. And it became for me an obsession, a 10-year-long obsession, to understand the speed of light and what it would be like if you could travel at the speed of light or close to the speed of light. Well, a year passed and I took the exam again for the Polytechnic Institute, and this time I passed. I became a student, and I was 16 and a half years old. Most of the students was 17 or 18 years old. And of course, I lived the life of a student. I left the Ventler home. I went to Zurich. I had an apartment of my own in one of the student sections of town, and I felt very liberated. I could go to the coffee houses and drink iced coffee, and learn to smoke my pipe. Yeah, and I was enrolled in a special program that, if I completed, would allow me to be a teacher of physics and mathematics at the high school level. Well, my parents they were pleased with this. They was not pleased when I shared with them my interest in a young woman who was a student in my physics class, one of my physics classes, Mileva Maric. Perhaps you have heard of her. She was 3 years older than me. She was not Jewish. When she was from Serbia. All the reasons why my mother hated her. Yeah. She did not wish me to continue to have feelings and to plan a future with this young woman. Well, it didn't happen overnight, of course. I think I courted Mileva for quite some time. She had a little boarding house where she lived with other female students who attended the institute, and I would go there with my violin, and I would join them, because the young women there, they could play instruments, and we would have little concerts, and I would play the violin. And little by little, Mileva and I became closer and closer. We had the same interests. We wished to explore the latest theories in physics, something that our professors did not wish to do. They would inform us about the past, about the great discoveries in physics in the past, but they would not touch upon the most cutting-edge discoveries in physics. And so for this reason, I cut many of my classes. I preferred to study on my own. There was an experimental physics lab, and very often the professor would hand out to the students instructions for experiments. Well, I would throw them in the paper, in the wastebasket, and I would come to the same conclusion on my own. I did not need to follow the instructions on the paper. And this, of course, did not win me many friends among the faculty. And then one day I had a big explosion in the lab, and I practically blew off my right hand. Yeah, and I complained all the time about one of the professors. I thought he was an old stodgy Professor Pernot. I forget his last name. Professor Weber was my other physics professor, and we become somewhat of enemies of one another, because of my attitude, because I ignored his lectures and I skipped classes all the time. Yeah, I would go to the cafes and I would study on my own, or I would discuss the latest theories, particularly the theories of electromagnetism by James Clerk Maxwell. I was very interested in this particular man's achievements on science. And we get closer and closer, myself and Mileva Maric. And we knew that we was falling in love. My parents were completely opposed to this. When the 4-year term was over, I took the final exams and I passed. Yeah. I think I was first or second in my class. What about Mileva? I'm afraid to say she did not pass. I think perhaps she was spending too much time with me, not enough time on her studies. Yeah, and she was, of course, she wanted to be a physicist. She was a physicist. She was brilliant. I could tell from the first day that I met her in class, the questions that she asked, the answers that she provided. Well, she went back to Serbia to be with her family. She took the exams twice. Both times she failed. Now, I am finished with my schooling. As the relatives are saying to me, well, Albert, you are a graduate. We can no longer support you. My father's business is not doing well. They're having a difficult time to provide me with some kind of income. So what am I going to do with my life? I send out applications to universities all through Europe to be a graduate assistant. What was the response? Nothing. Nobody wished to hire me. Either they would ignore my application or they would send me back a letter saying, thank you for your interest, but I am sorry to say that all the positions are filled for the coming year. To this day, I blame this situation on Professor Weber, my professor in physics in the institute. I think that he was letting people know, stay away from Einstein. He is nothing but trouble. Well, I hope I am wrong, but that is how I see it. So, but I am desperate. I write to Mileva and I tell her, when I find a job, why don't you come back and we will get married and we will start our own family. But meanwhile, I have to work. I get a position as in one school for a short time. I tutor an English boy in mathematics, but then I get into a fight with his father, and I lose that position. Yeah. And I become, in desperation, a substitute teacher. It is the worst position I have ever had in my life. Yeah. The way the students behave in the class was unfathomable. And I knew one day I'm going to, this is the revenge for the way I hit my own students, my own teachers, and my poor sister Maya. They were throwing things at me in the class. One time they threw a chair at me. You see, that is revenge for the thing I threw at my, yeah, so, and then I get a letter from Mileva informing that she is going to have a child. Well, yeah, we had a very romantic weekend. Yeah, when she came to Italy, we went to the Lake Como region in the north, and as I said, we had a very, very, very romantic weekend. Well, I should tell you that she gave birth to a little girl. We named her Liesel. But I never saw her. And she did not wish to return to Switzerland because she thought it would destroy my career if it was known that Albert Einstein's wife had a child before they are married. This was verboten at that time in the world. Well, we decided to give up the child for the adoption. So this broke her heart. This was giving up her own flesh and blood, and I don't think she ever recovered from that. In the meantime, I call upon my good friend Marcel Grossman, and he was an excellent mathematician, and because he took excellent notes, I was able to pass the math exam, because I didn't go to a single class. Marcel did. I could study his notes, and so I passed the exams. So now he was teaching, he was a professor or assistant professor, and I said, Marcel, I am desperate. Can you please help me find some kind of work? So he talked to his father. His father had connections in Bern, Switzerland, at the patent office, the official patent office. And so I was informed that if I go to Bern, I could make an application for this position. So I went, and I had an interview. And the person who was interviewing me asked me if I knew anything about patent law. I said, no, nothing. Do you know anything about the technicalities of patent applications? I said, no, nothing. But I am very good in mathematics and physics. And when I shared some of my interests, he said, well, all right, I'm going to give you the position, third-class patent expert. So I give my apartment in Zurich up. I moved to Bern, Switzerland. I get a new apartment, and I started a new job, 6 days a week, 8 hours a day for a good little salary. Mileva and I soon got married, and we started our own family. My first son, Albert, was born in 1903, I think. And of course, my parents were opposed to this marriage, but nevertheless, Mileva and I, we were in love. And I continued to work at the patent office. Can you imagine what I am doing all day? I would receive applications. I had to evaluate the applications to see if there was any legal problems and to see if the ideas were practical, if they could be incorporated, or if somebody else had already come up with this invention. And so I would write a report. I had a desk with a little drawer, and I could complete my work pretty early in the day, and that would leave me time to do my own work. You see, I am still a physicist by nature. And I had little scraps of paper in a drawer under the desk. And when the supervisor wasn't looking, I would open the drawer, take out a scrap of paper, and write my thoughts on a little piece of paper. And when he was walking by again, I would quickly shut the drawer and go back to my work. Yeah. One time a colleague came to visit me, and he wished to see where was my office. And I showed him, this is my advanced institute right here. And I opened the drawer. Well, in 1905, through this, all this time I am working on my own, at home at night, on the weekends, when I am not taking care of little Albert. And of course, my wife, she has come back from Serbia. We are married now. And her ambitions to be a scientist, they have been destroyed. She has not gotten a diploma. And now she is taking care of Albert, big Albert and little Albert, and taking care of the household, not with what she imagined would be her life. But I have to tell you that because of her brilliance, she and I would have lengthy discussions about my ideas that I was working on in my own time. And she would check my mathematics. She was a better mathematician than me. And she would point out where there was a mistake in my thinking or in my formulas. Yeah. 1905, when I am, how old am I? Okay, do the math. 26 years old, I published 5 papers in one of the most prestigious journals, physics journals in all of Europe. And one of the papers, I will tell you the title of the paper in English, on the electrodynamism of moving bodies, otherwise known as the theory of special relativity. Now, I can stop there, or I can try to share with you what is this theory. It is up to you. I don't wish to. You wish to hear that? Yeah, perhaps you have a better understanding, and you wish to. You can tell me what is it? Special relativity, yeah. Well, it was. I believe the papers brought me to the attention of other scientists and physicists, and of course they were surprised to find that this young person was working as a patent clerk in an office in Bern, Switzerland, But it was good work. I liked it. It was good. Yeah, so you know who it was that first expressed relativity? Can you guess? Galileo. Yeah. Galileo said relativity, all motion is relative. You don't know you are moving except in relation to something else. If you can disprove that, you will be the next Galileo. Yeah. Yeah. Perhaps you have been on the airplane? Yeah, and it is a very relatively quiet flight. Well, perhaps you can hear the engines. Maybe all the windows are closed. You don't know you are moving. You could be on the earth. You could be on land. You could do everything you want to do on the land. You can do inside the airplane cabin. It is perfectly still. You could be at rest. But how do you know you are moving? You don't know until you open the window. You look out. What do you see? The ocean or the land? And you can see in relation to the ocean or the land you are moving very fast, by the way. And that's why we don't feel the ocean, the movement of the earth. You know, the earth is spinning around its own axis at 1,000 miles per hour and something like 60,000 miles an hour around the sun. But we don't feel that motion. Why? We are moving with the earth. Similarly, if you're in the car, it is going down the highway at 60 miles an hour. You are traveling at 60 miles an hour too. You don't know you are moving. Well, suppose the car hits another car. Then you know you are moving. You will fly out of the windows at 60 miles an hour. So if the Earth was to collide into another planet, you would speed off into space at the speed of 1,000 miles per hour. Or 60,000, I don't know which. Pretty fast. So Galileo, he said, you know, all motion is relative. There is no such thing as absolute motion. And also, how do we measure motion? When you say 60 miles per hour, what does that mean? It only has meaning in relation to something else. You need a reference, something that is still, that is at rest. I should say, relatively at rest. Because we know there is no absolute resting point anywhere in the whole universe. Everything is moving, always. Newton would say we can use the Earth as a reference point for our calculations. And his own insights, they are responsible for what we call classical mechanics that allows people to go into space. Yeah, I won't go into the laws of motion right now unless you insist. We are going to, why don't we do a little experiment, yeah? We're going to show, well, let's see. These are the kinds of experiments, Duncan experiments that I am having, thought experiments, on my way to work, during the weekends. Suppose you are on a train, or you are waiting for the train. You are all standing at the platform and you are waiting for the next train. The train is coming by. It is going at, let us say, 60 miles an hour. And there are big windows on one side of the train. So the train is passing, and I am on the train, and I am playing catch with another passenger. And I am throwing the ball this direction at 5 miles per hour. So from your point of view and the platform, how fast is the ball traveling? You can confer with your neighbor to evolve the answer. What do you think? Yeah, Galileo said you can add speeds. So using that proposition, the speed of the ball from your frame of reference is 65 miles per hour. Yeah, but what about my frame of reference? Am I throwing the ball at 65 miles an hour? No. For me, it is traveling at 5 miles per hour, which is the correct answer. They are both correct, you see? That is all we can say, that we have two different frames of references. Both of them are correct. There is no final answer. Similarly, if I had the same ball and I tossed the ball in the air as if the train is stationary, it is at rest here, you can say, and you would agree with me, the ball is going straight up and straight down, yeah? But what if the train is moving? And I throw the ball up. In my frame of reference, I throw it up and it hits the floor, right at where my feet are. But from your frame of reference, what would you see about the direction of the ball? Would it be a straight line? No, because the train is traveling. It would appear to be at an angle, yeah? You see? Which is the correct interpretation of the direction of the ball. Neither one. They are both correct, you see? Yeah, because the train is moving. It is covering a certain distance, which is the base, let us say a triangle like this, and this is the distance the train has moved, and the distance that is additional to what you see from your frame of reference. But now, from my understanding of classical physics, I knew that the speed of light is, what is the speed of light? 186,000 miles in 1 second. So you could go around the Earth 7.5 times in 1 second at the speed of light. That's very fast, yeah? So Galileo, now we're going to put some things together. Galileo said you can add speeds. So here is a light beam. We know the train is traveling at 60 miles an hour. Now I am no longer a passenger. I am a guardian, not a guardian, like a conductor. And I am shining the light out of the front of the train. From your point of view, how fast is the light traveling? 60 miles an hour. Well, what is the speed of the light? 186,000 miles per second. So you might think you can add the speed of the train to the speed of the light. And if I reverse the direction of the light, you might think that you could deduct the speed of the train from the speed of the light to get the new speed of the light. Yeah? You would agree with me? Well, I don't think you should. This was the problem that faced me as a young man. The speed of light is invariant. It does not change. It is always that. It does not matter what is the source of the light, whether it is moving toward you or it is moving away from you. In a perfect vacuum, it will always be that speed. Well, Newton would say that by the laws of motion that there is no limit to how fast something can go. You can always add an external force, more and more force applied to a given object. And what is the ultimate limit? He would say, well, there is none. But there is a conflict, you see. This is the conflict I am trying to resolve between James Clerk's Maxwell understanding of light and Newton, the classical view of motion. This took me 10 years of labor to resolve this conflict. And in the meantime, I am challenging the greatest name in all of science, Isaac Newton. Yeah, and it is driving me crazy. I am obsessed with this problem. Either Newton is right or Maxwell is right. They can't both be right. So I am discussing this problem with a co-worker, Michel Bessot. He is also a patent clerk, and we would discuss our own scientific ideas on our way home from work. And I recall Galileo's thought experiment of a boat in a harbor, and people like waiting for the boat. They are seeing the boat in the harbor. Now, I wish you to do the thought experiment. Use your imagination. Picture yourself standing on the dock. You see the boat in the harbor, and it is sailing past you. There is a tall mast, and there is a sailor on top of the mast, and he drops a stone. From the sailor's point of view, where does the stone fall? At the base of the mast. But from your point of view, like with the train, it appears to be falling at an angle. Yeah? And I said to Michel Besson, what if the mast is as tall as a beam of light and the sailor drops a stone from 186,000 miles in space? Yeah? Yeah. From his point of view, it will fall at the base of the mast. But from the point of view of the observers on the deck, it will cover a greater distance. Well, I will show you a little formula. This, I think, was a turning point in my thinking. When I remember the simple formula, let us see. Can you see this? Yeah. Speed equals s. Speed is nothing more than distance divided by time. Yeah, simple formula. Well, Newton would say that space and time are absolute. They don't change. They have nothing to do with us, where we are, how fast we are moving. 1 inch is 1 inch, no matter you are here, you are on Jupiter. Intervals of time and space are absolute. 1 hour is 1 hour here and on Jupiter, anywhere in the galaxy. Yeah, but because I'm thinking this thought experiment of Galileo's ship, what if the value of s is the speed of light, which does not change in a vacuum? Then what must change for the equation to be working? Time and distance, time and space. They cannot be absolute, and Newton would say they must be variable. They must depend upon how fast you are going and where you are when you make the measurements. Are you with me? We can do one more little experiment. We're going to put somebody into space. Yeah. So who wishes to go into space? Yeah. We have twins, exact twins. What is your name?
Joan.
Joan is 25 years old. Yeah. And her twin is this young lady right here. What is your name?
Judith.
Judith is also 25 years old. And you are an astronaut, and we are going to put you in a glass rocket ship and blast you off into space. And you're going to go close to the speed of light. We have a powerful telescope here, so we can observe what is happening in the ship as she approaches the speed of light. Now, you are both 25 years old. You're going to be gone, I don't know, maybe 5 years or so. And now we are observing, and we are taking measurements of your heart rate, your heartbeat, etc. And of course, you are living your life on the spaceship. When we look through the telescope, we know that for some reason, Joan has decided to take a yardstick with her. We don't know why. She did not tell us. And this is this is 3 feet, 36 inches. Yeah, Newton would say, of course, this is constant, absolute. It will always be, it will always appear this way. But when we look through the telescope, as Joan approaches the speed of light, she wishes to measure something, and we can see, well, perhaps we can't see it yet, but yeah, it is here. So I'm always having difficulty finding this thing. Yeah, when we look through the telescope and we see her measuring with the yardstick, this is what we see. It appears to have shrunk. Yeah. This is as we are approaching the speed of light, of course. Now, Joan is very concerned about her appearance. We are all concerned. And she looks at herself in the mirror on board the ship, and she looks quite normal. But from our point of view on the Earth, she seems to be contracting in the same direction as the ship is traveling. And she's beginning to look like a strand of spaghetti. When we are measuring her heartbeat, well, she measures her own heartbeat, and it sounds a little bit like this. Pretty normal, yeah? But we can also hear her heartbeat down here on the earth. And here's what we hear. Oops. What is happening? It's slowing down. Yeah, so now Joan reaches her destination, and she turns around and she comes back to Earth. Now, from her point of view, 5 years have passed. Now she is 30 years old. She wishes to go and see her sister Judith. So the question is, I will ask Joan, and I have the answer right here. When you go to visit your sister Judith, are you the same age as her now? Are you older or are you younger? Well, that's why I have provided the answer. We're going to allow you to take out the answer and read it out loud so we can all enjoy.
I will be younger than my stay-at-home twin.
Yeah, perhaps for you 5 years have passed. You are 30 years old, but maybe 50 years have passed for Judith, or 20 years. In any case, you have aged much faster and more than your twin who was off into space. Well, how can that be? It couldn't be if Newton was right, but he was wrong. You see, space and time, they are relative to where you are and how fast you are moving. The faster you go, the slower time will pass, and distances will shrink, they will contract. It is not that you are a strand of spaghetti, but relatively speaking, from our point of view, when we look at you, we see that the ship you are on, everything in the ship is contracting in size. The distance between one end and the other is smaller. Similarly, your heartbeat seems to be beating more slowly. You are aging more slowly. You see? So for you, 5 years. For your sister, 20 years. That's not bad.
Oh, put me on a picture.
Yeah. So I will repeat it. It is the essence of special relativity. Measurements of time and space are relative to where you are and how fast you are moving. Yeah. The faster you go, the slower the time will pass. But at ordinary speeds in daily life, these are inconsequential differences. It is only when you are approaching the speed of light that these will manifest themselves. Now, when I published the paper, my former professor, Hermann Minkowski, at the Polytechnic Institute, when he read it, he was astonished that this old lazybones Einsteins could have written something like this. But not only that, but he put space and time together into one formulation called space-time, that we live in. Oh dear God. One reality of space-time, that time is the fourth dimension, yeah? It is no longer space and time, as Newton would say, but it is space-time. We only experience reality at these very high speeds. Now, first I disagreed with Minkowski. I thought this was a ridiculous formulation, but I come in time to agree with him, that one fabric. Now, it is getting late, and I wished to explain for you how I evolved the special relativity to encompass all kinds of motion. Would you like me to give you a condensed version of the theory of general relativity? Yeah, I will not burden you with the details of my life from 1906 to 1919. Nevertheless, much occurred, including my divorce from Mileva, the First World War, and my wish to enlarge the special relativity to encompass all kinds of motion, including accelerated motion. Special relativity only deals with one kind of motion, in a straight line, motion that does not increase or decrease. It does not accelerate, you see. But there are all kinds of motion in the world. Think of a balloon. When you release the balloon, it goes all which way, yeah? Well, I wanted a theory that would encompass every kind of motion, including accelerated motion. And it took me about 9 years to work out the theory in terms of equations, precise equations. Yeah, and it has to do with gravity. What is gravity? This was the problem that was obsessing me for all those years. Through the First World War, through my professorship at the University of Berlin, my divorce from Mileva, and my subsequent marriage to my first cousin, Else Lowenstein, who had 2 daughters whom I adopted. Yeah, and so we come to live together in Berlin in 1919. Yeah, so what my theory wanted to do was to understand gravity. What is it? Newton said it's a mysterious force between objects. This mysterious force between the Earth and the Moon and the Sun, etc. But how could that be? This force that is working through space must happen instantaneously, Newton said. Is that possible? If it is instantaneous, it is faster than what? Light. And we know that is not possible, so Newton had to be wrong. He didn't really know what gravity is. He just said, well, in the future, scientists will develop a more specific theory. That was my responsibility, I felt. Well, I struggled with the notion of this mysterious force between bodies. How could that be if nothing can exceed the speed of light? One day I'm sitting in the patent office, and another image just came into my mind. I pictured myself falling out of a window. I was not feeling like I wanted to kill myself, and if you wish to carry this thought experiment further, imagine yourself jumping out of a window with a scale, a bathroom scale attached to your feet. Yeah, are you with me? Well, let's put you on a plane. You jump out of the plane. And you know that before you jump out of the plane, you know how much you weigh. Let us say 170 pounds, if you are lucky. Now, you jump out of the plane, you look down at the scale. What do you see? Nothing. Zero. You have no weight. You are weightless. Yeah. This is what would happen to somebody who jumped out of a window. He would be weightless. He would be in free fall. So, but he would not feel himself being pulled to the ground. If Newton was right, the gravity would pull him down to the ground. Then I did another thought experiment. I said, what if I am on an elevator, and the elevator is slowly going down through the building, but then the cables break, and now it is speeding towards the ground? What would happen to me? Can you imagine? You would be in free fall. If you happen to have an apple in your pocket and you dropped it, what would happen to the apple as the elevator is dropping? It would be in free fall too. It would be floating. Yeah. Or if you let some coins up or your car keys or whatever. So then I went one step further with my thought experiment. What if you could put a rocket under the floor of the elevator, you put the elevator in space, and you accelerated the elevator upward at a certain speed? Then what would happen to the passenger inside the elevator? Would he still be in free fall? No. His feet would be back on the floor along with the apple and the key. And he would not know, am I in space or am I on the ground? What this led me to was the equivalence principle. Acceleration and gravity are one reality. They are two sides of the same thing. So the effect of acceleration is the same as the effect of gravity. And now, you are in space, you cannot look out, you are in an enclosed box, and you are accelerating upward. You don't know that you could be on the ground, for all you know, because your feet. I had a student once said, Professor Einstein, if I am on the elevator and it is falling because the cables are broken, and what if I jump up at the last moment? Will I save myself? Is that possible? No, because Your feet would not be on the floor of the elevator. You are in free fall, so how can you jump up? Well, I had to look for a solution elsewhere. If there wasn't a mysterious force we call gravity, then perhaps it has something to do with the nature of space-time. And that led me to a whole new branch of mathematics called tensor calculus. And what I evolved finally in 1915 on a series of papers that I presented in Berlin on the nature of gravity was that what we call gravity is a response to the curvature of space-time. It is embedded, it is a part of the nature of space-time itself. Well, let's see, how can we picture this? If you can imagine a little bit of space-time as a flat surface, perhaps as a cloth, yeah? And you put a heavy object in the middle of the cloth, what will happen to the cloth? Yeah, it will what? It will sink. You will cause a well, an indentation. And if you was to roll a ball on the same cloth, what would the little ball do? It would head toward the bigger ball, the object that has caused the indentation. It is not being pulled down by a mysterious force, but rather it is conforming to the sloping of the cloth, yeah? Or we can call it the nature. It is still in orbit like an object. Say I am a planet, and what we call an orbit is a straight line in curved space-time. Everything wishes to continue in a straight line, including the Earth, the Moon, all the planets. But because of the mass of the Sun, it is creating this well in the fabric of space-time. Because of the speed that I am traveling, I don't crash into the Sun. But instead, this is... Oh my God.
Can't cross that line.
Yeah, I cannot cross that line. It is the Maginot line. Yeah, so this is what it looks like. This, we call it an orbit, a straight line in space-time, in the curvature of space-time. It is an orbit, yeah? So this, what I finally revealed was that gravity is not a mysterious force. It is not a mysterious push or pull. All objects with mass will cause a curvature in space-time. And the curvature of space-time will tell the objects, whether they be planets or subatomic elements, how to move. And that is what I published. And one way to prove this was, I thought, well, light is energy, but energy is matter. So light must conform to the bending of space-time. Perhaps if we measure light from a distant star as it approaches our own sun, it should bend as it approaches the curvature of space-time around the sun. Only way to measure this bending is during a solar eclipse. There was going to be one in 1916, but what happened? World War I. 1914, excuse me. I had to wait until the war was over, and then Sir Arthur Eddington from Britain launched an expedition to test my theory. And he took 2 ships, one to the West Africa, one to Brazil, and they waited for the solar eclipse. They took photographs of the light from a distant star before the eclipse and after, and then it took 6 months to make measurements. And then there was a meeting in London in 1919, November, and all the very prestigious scientists were there. I was not there. My student said to me, one of my students, Professor Einstein, what if it turns out that you are incorrect? Then I said, I will feel very sorry for God, because I know the theory is correct. Well, the chairman at the meeting, apparently he stood up, and I recorded his words. I don't know if I can read them for you, but he stood up and he said, this is one of the greatest achievements in human thought since the days of Isaac Newton. Let us see. In the theory of gravity since Newton's day, and one of the highest achievements of human thought. Not bad. Yeah. Yeah, but it was one proof that my theory of gravity was correct. This was my theory of general relativity, that there is such a thing as gravity, but it has nothing to do with the push and pull. It has to do with the structures, the fabric of space-time. The next day, I don't know why, but newspapers around the world, the headlines were saying things like revolution in science, new theory of the universe, Newtonian ideas overthrown. Einstein said light would bend as it passed through space-time near the sun. The scientists measured, light bent. Overnight, the relatively unknown 40-year-old shaggy-headed German Jewish physicist, that is me, became a world celebrity, and science has been transformed. Well, I thank you very much for your pleasure of your being here. And if you ever come back to Princeton, I will be happy to continue with the story of my life and what it was like from that point on. Thank you again.